Hey everybody, it's Allison Haikila. Thank you so much for joining me on my YouTube channel today. So I have this set from Hero Arts. It's called Year of Fungi, and I haven't gotten a chance to use it. And I thought that today would be a great day to use it because I'm in the mood to use little images and pattern paper. So let's talk about pattern paper for a bit. I know that we've all got lots of pattern paper. Lots of pattern paper. Am I right? So I pulled out just a few in some warm tones, and I thought that we could talk about mixing patterns today. What works, what doesn't work quite as much, how to make everything go together, because sometimes I know it can be a little intimidating to figure out what goes with what. And when I do clean and simple cards with smaller stamps, such as these mushrooms, I find that using a bunch of patterns together can really make a lot of impact. So why don't we give it a shot today? I've grouped my pattern papers by color. So we've got some oranges here, some yellows here, and some reds off to the side. So how do we mix these patterns together? So let's start with these yellows. So as you can see, I've got this harlequin pattern and then a checkerboard pattern. Some of these are really old scraps. I like pairing geometrics together, but when you have something that is so close in size as far as the pattern itself and shape, kind of tend to stay away from that because it gets to be almost as if you're trying too hard to match it and it didn't quite work. However, pairing geometrics with florals is always great. So take a look at this here. This whimsical floral with this harlequin pattern. You've got different tones of yellow. You've got small-ish shapes in both, but not necessarily the same size. This floral is a little bit bigger than the harlequin. You've got some movement going on with the flying butterflies. You've got a hint of stripes that kind of work with the harlequin, but neither one overpowers the other. And in a small area, these would work really well together. Although, of course, if you wanted to make a scrapbook page and combine them, you can do that too. Another thing that works together is a pattern that is kind of almost not a pattern. So this paper has some subtle texture, but it's not an overwhelming pattern. And if you wanted to use these together, that would totally work. If you wanted to use these together, that would work too. The colors are a little off just because I find that it's almost too close for me. I personally would probably add some orange to this, just splatter it or something, just because I'd like it to be a little bit more different. Like this, you can see a very difference in coloration. But with this, it's kind of close. You see that? Now, we've got these here. We've got some stripes, which are geometric, but they're a little wonky, which is kind of fun. And then if you pair that with another like floral or an organic type thing, that looks really cool. It kind of pulls out these deeper tones of color that are in there. It's kind of fun. And then if you have this scallop design and pair that with the stripe, it looks cool too. Stripes work with pretty much everything. Polka dots work with pretty much everything. So geometrics work really well together and with more organic shapes. Let's take a look at the reds. We've got some gingham. This is a very pinky red, so I don't necessarily like it with these particular papers here. I kind of like it with the yellows, to be honest. And you don't need to keep color families together either. You can swap them out. Just because I have these yellows grouped together doesn't mean that I'm only going to use yellow. I just wanted to make it a little easier for you to see my color choices. You want to keep feel and scale together too, okay? Or keep an eye on it a bit. So this is super whimsical looking. The pattern is really clean. It's really small and tight. Whereas with this pattern, it's kind of grungy. It's really big, and it's kind of washed out. I wouldn't put these two together. They don't quite work with me. If this was just dots, I would say that would be okay because you've got all of these dots in the background. But this floral doesn't really work with this floral. However, this gingham, I think, looks kind of cool with it. Right? Again, I'd probably grunge it up a bit, but that's kind of my style. And don't forget, if you make your own pattern paper, these are both from my gel press, You can totally pair it up with pre-made pattern paper too, and it could work out just fine. So don't be afraid to mix the patterns that you make with pattern paper that was pre-made or purchased. I have colored my mushrooms with Copics, and I cut them all out, and then I grouped them together with some pattern paper that I thought would look nice with them. I kept them by color family as far as the pattern paper goes. So yellow with yellow, reds with reds, oranges with oranges. You don't need to do this, of course. I thought that it might be a little simpler to just show it in color families so that this way it might be a little less intimidating to group them together when you give it a shot. So I think that we're going to start with this red one. I'm going to move these off to the side for now. We'll come back to them later. And I have this little snail here too that I'm not sure where he's going to go yet, but he'll go somewhere. I also pre-cut my card base and my card front. So this is 4 by 5 1/4. And I have a card base here that's a standard A2 size card, and I really like the look of this gel print with these mushrooms. So we're going to tear this down literally and then add some of this gingham and see where we wind up. So with this, I'm going to just tear this. I'm taking a piece and pulling it towards me so that the rough edge is showing. I prefer the look of the rough edge than the sort of clean edge. Can you see the difference? So we're just going to tear all 4 sides. It's going to go like that. And the mushrooms are going to go here, like that. We'll have a sentiment, and we need some of this gingham on here. So when I use this, I kind of just like to play around with it. Where do I like it? What position do I want it to be? It's a little too heavy if I put it up top here. Looks kind of cool down here, but I'm not sure if I want to have such a heavy bottom. We can also add it on the side like that. It's really just a matter of playing. I decided to take my piece of white cardstock that I'm putting as my layer here, and I added some pink just to the edges. I tore my gingham down so that it would work in the corner. I really like this green that's showing, and that's going to go like this. The mushrooms are going to go here, and then I stamped out my sentiment on this long strip because I wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go, so it's a little safer to leave it long, and then I can cut it down when I've decided. But I think it's going to probably go here, maybe with these mushrooms right on top. I'm not one to plan things out for the most part. I kind of just let them happen organically. I think that's pretty cute. I'll probably just end it right over there, and then the whole thing will go on the white card base. So I'm going to put this together. Here's the first finished card. I popped the mushrooms up with some foam squares, and I kept the sentiment plain. I didn't put any ink or anything on it. I thought about it, but I figured that there was enough happening in the background that we didn't need to do anything else. Let's do the next card. For the second card, I decided to go with a cream card base. In my stash, I had this background that I had kind of gotten from using the gel press with, I don't know, maybe alcohol inks? I don't remember. But it's kind of just a ghost print and leftover stuff, but I thought it was interesting enough to work for this card. And then I have this paper here with this foliage, and there's all sorts of like inky paisley designs happening in the background that I thought was really pretty, and this wonky stripe. So when you're doing cards with a lot of patterns, and it again can be overwhelming, break out some of your dies. Circle dies, squares, whatever. I've got this scalloped circle that I think I'm going to use for this piece here, and then our mushrooms will sit on it, and then we'll figure out how we're going to work our stripes out. So I'm going to cut a piece of this foliage cardstock first. There we go. So if you use patterns in smaller pieces, like this little scalloped circle, it's a little less intimidating. You're not overwhelmed by this huge piece of paper that's like, oh, well, there's just so much happening. If you break it down into a smaller size, it becomes a little bit more manageable. And already this is looking pretty cute even without this stripe. I made a little switch. I really liked this scallop circle, but it was a little too small. And unfortunately, the die set that I used doesn't have a bigger size that was appropriate. It just went from this size to way too big. So I opted to just go with a circle instead, and it's fine. I really like this stripe, so I decided to cut it this way instead of cutting it the long ways. And I really like how this pattern looks with that. It picks up the blue in this background here. Even though it's not the same, it still works. And it keeps your eye moving up. And I think that we're going to just pop a little sentiment over there, and this card will be done too. I stamped the same sentiment that I used from the last card. And if you notice, there's this little bit of a space here. And I thought it would work really well with the circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere it down here, just like that. And then this card will be finished. So I'm going to glue this up. And here's the finished card. I like the cream for the sentiment because it works really well with the cream card base. And I've popped those mushrooms up again. When you're working with patterns that can be overwhelming, less is more. Breaking them down into smaller chunks makes them a little bit more manageable and less overwhelming on not only you when you're trying to create, but also on the eye as it's looking at the finished piece. Let's do the third card now. This paper already has some rips in it, so I think we're going to use that to our advantage because I really like the look of that. So I'm going to cut this down, and for this Harlequin design, I'm going to use this die, and we're going to plan it out from there. So let's get that going. Off screen, I cut this piece down, leaving those rips at the top, which I think are pretty cool. I cut that piece down, which I think is going to go over here, but I decided that this white space is a little too blank for me, but I don't want to use an additional pattern paper on it. So instead, what we're going to do is move all of these guys, including our snail, off to the side, and I'm going to take some spray stain in Speckled Egg, and I'm just going to flick it on here a little bit. I'm opening it up. I hardly ever use these sprays, not just distress sprays, but any spray, with the atomizer. I don't usually spray it. I usually just flick it like this. I find that I have a bit more control, and it's not necessarily as overpowering as if I were to spray it. And that gives us a pattern that we made ourselves that took 2 seconds to do and adds just enough interest where that white piece isn't quite so stark and obvious anymore. And this is going to go here like that. And we're going to glue our little mushrooms on top. And we've got some fun patterns going on that are not overwhelming each other. They're not fighting each other. They just kind of work. And I think that this little snail will finally have a home. Maybe over here. And we'll add a sentiment. So I'm going to glue this up really quick. This is all glued. And we are going to do something a little daring because these mushrooms are all popped up. You can see the dimension there, but I decided that I don't want to put my sentiment on a strip this time, so we're going to put it right on this paper. So I've got VersaFine Clear ink in Pinecone, and we're going to hold our breath, and there we go. Perfect. Third card complete. I love these rips. I think that's so cool. It was accidental, but I love that. Let's take a look at all 3 cards. So we have multiple patterns on each of these cards. We didn't go too crazy with them. We could totally add more if we want to, but the trick is to do baby steps if pattern paper intimidates you. And this mushroom is so pronounced and obvious that it almost acts as a pattern itself. So this is a gel printed background with some gingham that's kind of aged and distressed. We've got this foliage pattern here with the wonky stripes and a subtle kind of herringbone pattern in the background. And then this third one with our little snail friend has these pretty florals in different colors that work with the colors of the mushrooms and a harlequin pattern, and of course our little splatter. So I hope that you've learned some things about mixing patterns together. If you like trying to mix patterns together, let me know in the comments. If you'd like to learn more about mixing patterns, let me know in the comments. I'd love it if you became a subscriber of my channel. Give this video a thumbs up. It will help me so much to grow my channel, and I hope to be back very soon. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. Peace out.